The failure of the January Uprising. Today, we will talk about the Spartacus League. This is the story of a communist revolutionary movement that tried and failed to change Germany forever. Not through simple slogans, but through a profound belief that history, in the end, must stand on the side of the oppressed. In January 1919, Germany was no longer the mighty empire that had once dominated Central Europe. The war had ended, but what it left behind was not peace, but a vacuum of power, of faith, and of the future. Trains filled with defeated soldiers rolled slowly back toward Berlin. They returned not to cheers, but to silence. Men who had been taught that they were fighting for the fatherland were now left with only one question hanging in their minds. Where was that fatherland now? Emperor Wilhelm II had abdicated. The German Empire collapsed so quickly that even those living within it could not grasp what had just happened. A regime that had existed for decades vanished in just a few weeks. Berlin in those days was an exhausted city. The price of bread rose day by day. Coal was scarce. Working-class families stood in long lines just to exchange for a meager meal. But more dangerous than hunger was rage. Rage over the war. Rage over broken promises. Rage toward a ruling elite that had led the country into catastrophe and then disappeared without leaving answers behind. In that vacuum, something began to happen. Across Germany, workers' and soldiers' councils emerged. They met in factories, in former barracks, in makeshift halls. For the first time, ordinary people felt that they were not merely subjects of history but could become its authors. For many, this scene evoked memories of Russia 2 years earlier. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. An empire collapsed. A new order built from the ashes. And there were those who believed. If it could happen in Russia, then it could happen in Germany. The Spartacus League was born from that belief. They took their name from Spartacus the slave who once challenged the Roman Republic itself. This was not a random choice. It was a declaration that the oppressed could rise, and that history did not belong only to the powerful. The two central figures of the movement were Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. They were not uneducated dreamers. They were intellectuals, theorists, people who had devoted their entire lives to opposing imperialist war and capitalism. Luxemburg believed that socialism could not be imposed by decree, it had to be born from the consciousness of the masses. Liebknecht, the man who had been the only member of parliament to vote against the war in the German Reichstag, believed that the old system had completely lost its legitimacy. For them, January 1919 was not merely a political crisis. It was a historical moment that could not be missed. But history is never as simple as theoretical pages suggest. Because Germany at this moment did not belong only to the Spartacus League. The Provisional Government of Germany was in the hands of the Social Democratic Party, the SPD. A left-wing party. A party that spoke of workers, of reform, of social rights. But unlike Spartacus, the SPD believed that Germany was so exhausted that it could not endure another revolution. They feared civil war. They feared chaos. They feared that Germany would completely disintegrate if order collapsed once again. And so, they chose stability. Parliamentary democracy. Compromise with the old military establishment. Order at any cost. Two left-wing forces, both speaking in the name of workers, both promising a better future yet standing on opposite sides of history. In January 1919, Berlin became the place where ideals collided head-on with brutal reality. Protests erupted. Newspaper offices were occupied. Revolutionary slogans echoed through the biting cold. But the Spartacus League had no clear military plan. They did not control the army. They lacked nationwide support. Even within their own ranks, debates continued, should they push further or not? Meanwhile, the SPD government made a fateful decision. They called upon the Freikorps paramilitary units made up of radicalized veterans, accustomed to violence and without mercy. For them, order mattered more than ideals. and anyone who threatened order had to be eliminated. The crackdown was swift and brutal. Within just a few days, the movement was crushed. On January 15, 1919, Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht were arrested. They were not put on trial. There was no court. There was no opportunity for self-defense. They were tortured. They were murdered. Their bodies were discarded as if they had never been human beings who believed they were fighting for the future of humanity. The revolution ended, before it could truly begin. But the failure of the Spartacus League was not merely the failure of a movement. It left lasting consequences. The German communist movement was severely weakened. Political violence was legitimized. A culture of compromise with extremism took root. And in the vacuum left by that failure, another force gradually emerged, more ruthless, more extreme, and fully prepared to exploit society's fears. National Socialism would enter history from that very soil. The Spartacus League did not fail because it lacked ideals. It failed because its ideals arrived too early in a society not yet prepared to pay their price. History, sometimes, does not choose those who are right. It chooses those who fit the moment. And in January 1919, Germany chose order over revolution. The cost of that choice would be witnessed by the entire world in the decades that followed.